Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about, afternoons and news you need to know about. We're going through the fan canary. We answer fans questions. Hopefully, we get some good ones after the draft. Always a fun time. Always love doing the draft ones. These are really, really fun. But before we get into the draft news, I want to go through some of the other stuff that has come out after the draft, and especially during the head coach GM press conferences that the Dolphins did each day of the draft as they normally do. I thought there were some interesting things that were said in those. And we have some updates on Dalvin Cook, which I think definitely warrant talking about. So this first news story comes from Pro Football Rumors. Dolphins host tackle Cameron Fleming, obviously a longtime player in the NFL. He's 30 years old. I think they've also checked in on Cameron Irving. Obviously, George Fant rumors have gone around as well. Not to mention the fact that in the press conference, which I want to add into here, if you guys watched it, and this was a report that was, I think, NBC Sports reported on it first, that the Dolphins contacted Taylor Lewan, and then obviously that video came out of him saying it. So the Dolphins definitely are looking into the tackle market, at least so far, which obviously, why not? Now, obviously, Cameron Fleming, George Fant, and especially Cameron Irving, those aren't top shelf tackles. Those are not people that I would even say are better than Austin Jackson in some instances. Obviously, George Fant is the most talented out of the group when you talk about Fleming and Cameron Irving. Taylor Lewan would be a godsend. I don't know. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. You know, they said in the press conference it was more of like they're just doing their due diligence on the player when he was cut, just checking in on why he was cut. But clearly they have an interest at depth at that position, as they should. In a perfect world, especially after June 1st, I would, which is when the Dolphins get some cap space back from Byron Jones, I would hope that, or before June 1st, or however, I can't remember how it works. But anyway, the point is, I would personally like Taylor Lewan to, out of all of them, clearly he's the more talented player, but he could also have potential to be a solid starter still in the NFL, and none of those guys do. So they're not going to really give, and if any of those guys even came close to beating out Austin Jackson, that's a really big red flag. But I think we're all at this point pulling for Austin Jackson because, I mean, what else are we gonna do at this point? You know, it's kind of a barren wasteland. So a little bit of going ahead here, because we're going to talk about this in more depth. But obviously the Dolphins drafted a running back, and a lot of people were, especially when he was picked, were kind of upset because they would rather have Dalvin Cook than the player that they picked. As NBC has reported today, and this comes from Pro Football Rumors, that the Dolphins would still show interest in Dalvin Cook if he was cut. They would still be in the mix, despite obviously selecting Devon Achane from Texas A&M, which we'll talk about later. Mike McDaniel did say in the press conference nothing is still off the table. So we'll see what happens with that. It's looking more and more like Dalvin Cook will be released. And honestly, I think it's going to be harder to fit him into the cap room, especially when he's free, and a lot of different teams are going to want him because he is a very talented player. It might have been a little bit easier to trade for him. It doesn't seem like we're going to be making any big trades in the foreseeable future after what Chris Greer said. That pretty much what he said, at least the first round pick in 2024 is off the limits, which I agree with. I don't think we need to mess with the future that much. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Dalvin Cook. Is he going to be a Dolphin? I would say most likely not, because of the cap stuff, not to mention the fact that it's like, do we really want to spend in getting a bidding war, especially if his market is popular? You know, we've heard like teams like Dallas and Denver might get involved, maybe Buffalo. I don't know if like we're going to have we have a lot of things going our way, but it's just the money that I worry about. And then when you look at the roster, it's like we traded for Jeff Wilson. We just re-signed Raheem Mostert, who did really well for us last year. Played really good football, especially as the year went on. He got better and better. And now we just drafted A-Chain from Texas A&M. It's like, why in the world would we spend a good amount of the cap, or if we have to pay a large sum? I wouldn't say, I don't know. Who knows what his market is? If it's 9-10 million, that's the going rate for running backs now. I don't know if the Dolphins would be willing to do that. It does seem that Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer do have a good relationship in terms of picking players. So if Mike is pretty adamant about it, maybe they make it work. I don't know. It just doesn't seem like the most intelligent thing to do. But Dalvin Cook is a phenomenal player, and if it did happen, and if it still happened, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. That'd be very deep at that position at that point. And I do think someone like an A-Chain could still make the roster, because I feel like his skill set is such a niche skill set. It's not very traditional. I don't think he'll be used in that traditional way. So I feel like they could still fit the roles there if it was Mostert, A-Chain, and Cook. And if it's not, if it's Wilson, A-Chain, and Cook, if it's Wilson, A-Chain, and Mostert, then that's fine. But a backfield of Mostert, A-Chain, and Cook would be fun. That's really it for free agency, I think. So let's get into this draft, because this is a very controversial draft. I'm excited to get into the picks. And I really want to compare it to last year's class, because I think there's some interesting comparisons there. I've seen a lot of Dolphins fans pretty upset, and I think the reason why is because of the players on the board. If you looked at who was on the board in the second round, you had Darnell Washington, who also fell to them in the third round, and they went A-Chain instead. But you had players like Osiris Torrance, who is a phenomenal guard. Unfortunately, Buffalo took him. I don't know why he fell as far as he did. Maybe teams were worried about the athletic ability. But I don't know. We could toss and turn that all day. The tight end board was pretty weak. I'm not the biggest Darnell Washington fan. I think the biggest thing he brings to a team is run blocking. His separation is questionable at best. And I know people will probably bring up the fast 40 time, but it did not show up on tape in terms of playing the position. I think he would have taken at least a year to kind of develop, and if he were to develop into a receiving tight end, I think it would at least take a year to do that. So even though Darnell Washington is a big name, I could totally see why you would pass him up for someone like Cam Smith, but because I think Cam Smith is a better player, but it didn't fit a need. So let's get into this draft. Now, when I look at this draft as a whole, I think the Dolphins have had a phenomenal offseason so far. This draft definitely disappointed me in terms of my overall thoughts on it. I thought, and again, we didn't have a lot of ammunition to move around the board, so we were very much at the mercy of other teams. But I definitely expected a little bit more urgency to get a tight end for sure. Unfortunately, dude, all of them are gone at that point. At least the players that I liked at that position. But even getting guard help would have been nice, in my opinion. It just wasn't a position of need in an already deep cornerback room. When you think about Jalen Ramsey, not Cam Smith, but Kader Kohu and Xavier Howard and Nick Needham. Chris Greer did say something interesting that, some of these picks are not just for this year, but they're for also down the road. So maybe they're looking ahead and we've heard rumors about them trying to replace X for years. Maybe that's what the decision making was. I hope it was Vic Fangio. I love Cam Smith. The mock draft that I do every year just to see how many I can get right, I had him going in the first round. So I love Cam Smith as a player. But it just didn't feel. I just don't understand maybe they didn't think Kader could fit Vic's system as much. I don't know, because he had such a good rookie season. Obviously, Nick coming off the injury. And when Chris Crew said, you can never have enough corners, it's true. I think we can all agree that we don't want to see Keon Crossan or Igbenogany take major snaps this upcoming season. But it is such a deep position that, I don't know. I understand. I don't think it's as bad as people are saying, but my overall thoughts of the draft, I would say, is a bit lower than maybe some other people. I thought it was okay. I thought it was better than last year's draft if you look at it. And this is something that I thought was interesting, like looking back on it. Obviously, this was last year. This was the 2022 NFL draft class. It was Channing Tindall, Eric Ezukama, Cameron Good, who will probably never play it down for us in the NFL, at least major snaps, and Skylar Thompson. That was the draft. Probably the best player on. It's not probably even that debatable. Is Skylar Thompson in terms of impact and snaps. If you look at this draft with Ryan Hayes, Cam Smith, Elijah Campbell, and Devon Achane, I would take this class over that class any day of the week. I think Cam Smith can be a Pro Bowler in the NFL, which is not something I can say for any of the other players on that list. Cam Smith is a very talented player, and I really like him. So I do like this class more than last year's class, that's for sure, because I think we got better players. Like Devon Achane, I actually can see taking significant snaps for the Dolphins, even though, and we'll get into this here in a second, I'm not the biggest fan of his game necessarily in terms of what I thought the Dolphins needed running back. In terms of running the football, I think his receiving ability can be very special, and obviously we desperately needed a special teams returner, and I think he can be phenomenal at that. So it did fit a big need in a lot of different areas. So I do like this class more than last year's class. Elijah Campbell, I love it. When you look at the history of the NFL, this is what kind of gives me pause. Tight ends usually don't do well the rookie seasons. And he's a player who is not only not is this going to be his first year as a tight end, but he's also switching positions. And the way that Mike described what his role will be if he makes an impact in training camp and preseason, it seems like he's just going to play that tight end position on third downs. We'll see how well he does in the run blocking side of it, which I think he can do. But I really like that pick. I think that's a sneaky good pick. Or not Elijah Campbell, Elijah Higgins. I don't know why I keep saying that. Excuse me. Elijah Higgins. But if you, honestly, and when I was watching him play, he really reminded me of Jordan Reed. Very similar type of player who I believe Mike might have coached at Washington. But Jordan Reed, 6'2", 243 pounds. Elijah Higgins, 6'3", 234 pounds. They're literally the same player. Obviously, Elijah's definitely going to gain weight, I would suspect, to play tight end in the NFL. But physical player, big player, great run after the catch, physical after the catch, good 50-50 ball guy. I really was impressed with what I saw from Elijah Higgins. I really liked what I saw from him. And if he can make that transition, then he could be a problem in the middle of the field. And I will also say that I saw some people comparing him to Thomas Durante, who also was changing positions when he went to the NFL. To me, if you watch both of them play, and if anybody remembers Thomas, Higgins much more talented, bigger player, way better receiver. It definitely came more natural to him, more physical too. It's not even close. Way better after the catch than Thomas was. So he has the DNA of a tight end, which makes me happy. So Elijah, and like I said, I think this class, did it fill the needs we needed? No. Did it address any of the issues that we had with this roster? Were we staring down the barrel of Durham Smythe being the number one option at tight end? Yeah, we were, which is a big problem. Thank God they at least got Elijah Higgins, because if that was the fact, then I would have given this draft class an F. Because you can't go into the season with Durham Smythe as your number one option at tight end. God bless Durham. I love him. He's a solid 2 in the NFL. But for the love of God, he could not, and for Tua's sake, he just can't be the number one option. And maybe they just don't value that position to the point where it's like we can have a below average starter in the NFL at that position. It's not a good look. It was a huge hole that I was hoping, obviously, they would address with a premium pick. I don't know, maybe it'll come out later. Maybe they tried to trade up to get some of these tight ends because they went off the board pretty quick in that second round. But a lot of them did fall to the second round. And I don't know, maybe they could have given up some future capital to get one of them. But to me, that was the biggest blight on this class. I really was hoping that they would value that position a little bit more. And they clearly don't. And it does make me a little bit worried. And the two things that make me worried about this offseason is the faith in Austin Jackson and the devaluing of a tight end. I think those two hopefully don't come back to bite us, and maybe someone like an Elijah Higgins, who is a polished player, but he is going to have to make a transition to tight end. We'll see how that works. Hope it works out, but he did remind me a lot of Jordan Reed. Maybe not as quick in terms of route running, but definitely different styles after the catch. But similar, I don't know, just gave me the same type of vibes. But yeah, overall, it was definitely a scary draft. I'm glad at least they got somebody who could potentially play that tight end one role. And I want to talk about Devon Achane a little bit more. And we're going to answer some questions on him as well. But interesting player. And I watched a lot of his games to prepare for this podcast because I didn't want to come in, obviously I didn't watch a lot of Texas. I don't watch a lot of college football, so I really did a deep dive on him. I did watch a lot of Cam Smith before the draft for reasons that I couldn't tell you. I don't know why I did, but we'll talk about Cam Smith a little bit more later. But so Devon Achane, the thing that I worry about him, his size is it's too small. And I know some people in Dolphins fandom are going to compare him to Darren Sproles. I don't know what Darren Sproles' weight was, and you know what? We're going to look that up right now. But his size concerns me a lot. He was arm tackled quite a few times. In between the tackles was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Now clearly, and for whatever reason, 5'6", 190. Now, which is actually shorter than Devon Achane, but he still weighs more. And that's Darren Sproles that we're talking about. 5'6", 190 for Darren Sproles. And when you want, he's very skinny. He sucked in between the tackles. He has, in terms of positives, and again, it's not his fault. He's just too skinny and too small. But he got arm tackled a lot. The thing, and one more negative that I want to talk about with him, he's an open space player. He's a space player. He's a sideline to sideline running back. His ability to make people miss after the catch was concerning. And I would say him running the football, it was more positive, but there was a lot of one-on-one situations where he got tackled easily. If you guys go watch the Alabama game or even the LSU game, that was a concern of mine with him. If you're going to be that small and weigh that little, you have to be shifty in the open field because that's what you're going to be in the NFL as a space player. Darren Sproles was much better at that than Devon Achane. Maybe he can gain some weight and be more of a threat that way, but nobody was really concerned when he caught the ball in the open field. He just wasn't much of a threat at the receiving position for whatever reason. I don't know. He just wasn't very good at it. So in between the tackles, and I was underwhelmed with his ability to shake people in open space. But his speed is special. I think everybody has said that a million times. He's a phenomenal kick returner and punt returner. His vision is really, really nice. He has got great vision at the running back position. He does have good contact balance, which a lot of people bring up, but it's very important. Um, it's inconsistent though, because if it's he doesn't have any contact balance when it comes between to being armed when people are grabbing at him in the trenches. That's not gonna. It's just never gonna happen for him in the NFL, and that's not how he's gonna be used in the NFL. I have no idea why Texas A&M treated him like Adrian Peterson at times, because that's just not his game. We're gonna get him in space more, and again, I think we're gonna use him better than A&M did, and maybe that we'll get to see some of the stuff he can do in the open field a little bit more. But it does worry me that he's more of a track star than an NFL player. I will say that. He didn't seem like his vision is phenomenal. But the open space stuff worries me. Like, okay, yeah, he's not going to do anything in between the tackles at all. His strengths in the run game are going to be, side to side, taking sweeps, pulling guard on the edges, pulling a tackle on the edges, catching screens. I do think his route running is really nice. His hands are really good as well. Much better receiving back than what Chase Edmonds did for us last year. He looked good when he played in the slot. Like, he looked really, really good. So I think that's where he's going to be at his best. But I definitely needed to see more in the open space from him. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but I'm not as high on A-Chain as a lot of other people. Maybe he's can kind of, I don't know, hopefully he proves me wrong, but he seemed more, and the only thing I will say about the argument against what I'm about to say, he seemed more of a great athlete as opposed to a great football player. But I will say this, his vision is good. It's really good. So that kind of makes me feel a little bit better about his feel for the game, and maybe he can unlock some of that, especially in an offense where he's going to have a lot of opportunities to get into open space because of the weapons around him. So I'm not the biggest fan of Devon A-Chain as a answer to the running back thing, but I think he has potential to kind of mold himself into a Darren Sproles-like player who can be a pretty cool threat and fun player to watch in the pass game. His receiving skills was pretty nice. His hands were great, but his ability to shake people in the open space was the biggest mark against him, especially for a player with that style and that size. I just expected to see a better player when he catches the ball in the open space. When he's running the ball and there's a safety between him and the end zone, he does a much better job at that. You see more consistent his ability to shake that player and get more yards out of the play. But in the pass game, I have no idea maybe it was because the quarterbacks weren't great. So, I don't know. I expected to see more. So definitely not as high on A-Chain as most people. Just to run through this quick, because this is going to be just a quick thing and opinion on this. Obviously, Ryan Hayes, who was a deep pick out of Michigan. He played tackle in Michigan for a long time. He started there. He cannot play tackle in the NFL. I just will tell you guys, go watch the Senior Bowl stuff. It is bad. Okay, he got manhandled at the Senior Bowl to the point where he looked like he just came off the street. It was bad. He does have a lot of potential at guard. Even though, and I know a lot of people have brought this up, and I'm no NFL scout. I'm about to use a term. Everybody's about to roll their eyes right now. But his anchor, his ability, let's just put it this way, his ability to absorb contact is bad. And that makes me think he might not even make the roster. But his ability to move and pull in the run game and move people out of the way and deliver punishment as opposed to absorbing it is actually pretty dang good. And I was like, you know what? I could see this guy being a very good run blocker in the NFL. But as a pass protector, it was severely lacking. And I was like, all right, this guy might just be terrible. Like, if he can figure that out in the NFL, because he can't play tackle, like, there's just no shot in this planet this man's playing tackle in the National Football League. He could play guard. But he would have to get better at anchoring and being a better pass protector just in general. And maybe that would be a little bit easier for him at guard, but he just was, especially by power, he just was struggling big time on that. Which is what you see. But at least he has some talent and is 1,000% in the run game. So yeah, I think we've pretty much covered everybody except Cam Smith. I love Cam Smith. He's a great player. If he was, again, I think this is what makes this class better. I think Cam Smith can be like a really good player in the NFL, and I can't really say that for last year's class. So I don't really have any issues with Cam Smith. I love the passion that he plays with. I think the criticism from people on ESPN and NFL Network of him not being involved in the run game, maybe they got him mixed up with a different corner, but to me, he was extremely physical. He was a phenomenal player when it came to beating blocks in the screen game and in the running game. Did he have some plays where you're like, okay, maybe he made a business decision? Honestly, there's a run that Devon Achane had where I think a tackle or a guard was on Cam Smith, and he really didn't challenge it too much. But there's no corner in the NFL that would win that matchup. But he does in other plays when it comes to guards and tackles, uses his elusiveness to get around them and make the play. I saw a few of those, especially when teams run on the edge against South Carolina. Cam Smith was phenomenal at stringing it out and making the tackle. So I disagree with that criticism of him. I love the physicality that he plays with. He has phenomenal instincts. He's really good at the game of football. And he's got a great feel for what the other team's doing. I loved his post-draft press conference when he was talking about technique. I thought it seems that he loves the game. He loves talking about it, which I think is important. Very smart player. Obviously a great athlete. I think he's going to be a good starter in the NFL. And I don't think his floor is low. I don't think there's a shot in this world that he's a bust. I think this is a player that's going to start for the Dolphins and be a good Dolphin, at the very least. And I think his high end could be a shutdown corner in the NFL. I really do believe that. I know a lot of people also point out the penalties and how he can be a little bit too physical down the field. I will say that yes, he does get handsy at times, but it wasn't a problem. I don't think it was someone like, I'm trying to think of a corner that's like a bigger corner. He's too fluid and athletic for that to be a problem with him. He doesn't have to hold. And there are plays where there was zero man blitz coverage that South Carolina played. It was against Clemson, and Clemson ran a deep post. He had no safety help, and the blitz did not get home, and he carried this thing across the field, 60 yards down the field, one-on-one with a Clemson receiver, and bagged it, and picked the ball off too. And I haven't seen a play like that from a corner in a very long time coming out of college. So I love the passion that he plays with. Really physical player, and it's a great pick, but it just doesn't make sense for the team at this point. I think is the only negative about the pick, because he is a really good player. And honestly, if you looked at the board at that time, if you had to sit down and ask me who's a better player, Torrance, the Florida guard, I keep forgetting his name, I'm sorry guys, or Darnell Washington, who at that point, at least in my opinion, was the best tight end available, I would have said Cam Smith is by far the better player between those two, in my opinion. I think there's no flaw in his game, in my opinion. I really like his, and the thing that I love about him the most is the passion that he plays with. But phenomenal corner. And if I was the GM of the team, would I have picked him? No. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I would not have picked him. But he is a better player than those two. I don't think that's any doubt. But the only negative is just like, Jesus, man. I'm like, what what is the corner lineup going to look like when the season starts? I will say this. Secondary is going to be sick. Secondary is going to be real sick. And if Brandon Jones got hurt, I think, and he could totally play that Kareem Jackson role in Vic Fangio's system. Like, he could do that in his sleep. So maybe they wanted him to kind of play a little bit of safety, to be a little bit more versatile, because obviously Cam is much more talented than Brandon Jones, especially covering people one-on-one. That's not even a debate. So, and he's honestly a good tackler. I know some people say that he's kind of a alligator arm tackler, does not wrap people up. I did not see that. I thought he was a pretty dang good tackler, and he's a much better corner than a lot of corners that went ahead of him. So I love Cam Smith, like the best pick of the last 2 years in terms of talent. It just didn't fit the needs of the team. Overall, I like this class much more than last year. And if it wasn't for Cam Smith, I would have given this draft an F. But the fact that they got a really good corner, and I can't even argue the fact he's just a very talented player. I'm not the biggest A-Chain fan. He does fix the special team return issues, which is a godsend. Like, he's going to be really good at that because he's got great vision and great speed, and that's all you need to do to be. And he's got really good hands, and that's all you need to do to be a special teams difference maker, which is a big deal in the NFL. And he can be really good at that. So, and I do think he has a lot of ability in the pass game. I think he can honestly be a better receiver than a tight end. And I know I said him after the catch wasn't great, but his ability to run routes and catch the football was pretty special. Like, that popped off when I was watching. Like, I was like, all right, he's really good at that. So, I'm not the biggest HA fan, but I do think he has a potential to become a very good change of pace back in the NFL. And maybe we'll use him better than A&M did, because A&M, I don't know what they're doing down there, but it's not conducive to what their players do, at least. So yeah, that's my thoughts on the draft. Overall, better than last year. I think the high-end talent, it's not a question. A-Chain and Cam Smith have potential to really make an impact on the season. And I do think Elijah Higgins can actually be a starting tight end in the NFL. It's going to be interesting to see if he gains the weight. He's already 230. If he puts on the more, like, I don't know, he needs to put on like 6 more pounds maybe. I think he can be a good tight end in the NFL. And he can be a great receiving threat in the middle of the field. But that's more of a question mark. We'll see how that goes in preseason. And then Ryan, like, he'll be lucky to make the team. I'm sorry to tell that to people, but if he does make the team, it will be a guard. There's no way that he'll be our swing tackle or depth at tackle, and I think that's why you see the Dolphins still really, especially after the draft, still really interested in that tackle market to add some depth. All right, let's move on. We actually have questions this week, which I'm excited about. But yeah, I know people are probably gonna. I don't know how y'all feel about A-Chain. I think there's like a broad spectrum of like opinions on him. But I'm excited to see what an actual offensive coordinator can do, and can come up with to kind of, to kind of unlock. It reminded me of C.J. Spiller. Reminded me of a little bit of Reggie Bush. He wasn't as good, obviously physically, but there's a little bit of that in there. There was a little bit of Sproles, even though I thought Sproles was much better in the open field than A-Chain. But he kind of reminded me of that type of a running back. What was I going to do? Oh, yeah, the thank you name. Sorry. But yeah, I'm excited to see what Cam Smith does in a Dolphins uniform. And he's got phenomenal, and something I didn't bring up, but his break on the ball and his ability to diagnose plays, especially in zone coverage, is phenomenal. So again, a great player. Just it's like the cornerback battle. Nick Needham might not make the team. I guess he would at that 5th corner position. They probably, and again, Mike did bring up the fact that we're going to see a lot of 5 defensive backs on the field at a time. And that's obviously something that every NFL team does. But especially if you don't have like the best covering middle linebacker, like teams like that, like a Fred Warner, you will see that a lot less. But it seems that especially Vic's defense, we're going to see a lot more 5 defensive back lineups. So I guess when you look at it that way, it's a great scheme fit. And he's going to be used. I mean, nobody in last year's class except Skylar Thompson was the biggest contributor in the world. And we're going to talk about the undrafted class on the next episode, because I could not find a concrete list that wasn't locked behind a paywall, and it's hard to follow. But the Dolphins did get a punter, which I was hyped about. I know he led the FBS in putt average, so I was pretty excited about that. This next question comes from Or this first question, comes from Nothing Face. He says, are we going to address the offensive line this year or what? We really need depth on the line because every year the offense stalls out after the line sustains too many injuries and our quarterbacks can't effectively play because of lack of pass protection. What good are all of these offensive weapons if you can't fully utilize them in the last half of the season? Also, if we go all in on Dalvin Cook, do you see us even having the option to add talent and depth on the O-line? No, probably not, especially with the market. That's what I don't think Dalvin Cook's going to be a Dolphin, and I hate to kill people's dreams on that, but it just doesn't seem very viable. But I will say that it does seem like they're going to add one tackle before training camp. That to me is more likely than them getting Dalvin Cook. I hope it's Taylor Lewan. If I had to pick one, the other guys are just, I mean, come on. You know, I think Billy Turner's still out there, which would be an interesting reunion. But who honestly is a better player than Cameron Fleming and George Fant. You know, Donovan Smith is still out there. But Taylor Lewan, I think, has the highest potential to actually be something. And could actually beat out Austin Jackson in camp, and then Austin Jackson could back up Lewan. I think that's the best scenario. This next question comes from Douglas Ward. So to answer your question, Nothing Face, yeah, I think they're going to add tackle depth, and I don't think Dalvin Cook will be a Dolphin. This next question comes from Douglas Ward. He says, "Hey Skaggs, thanks for all the podcasts. Thank you for saying that. I am cautiously optimistic about our 6th pick, the tight end / wide receiver. I think this is a potential steal, quick fix development steal pick. What do you think?" Like I said earlier in the show, they had to do something at the tight end position because, like I said, God bless Durham Smythe, but he's not the answer. And he would have been a below average tight end in the NFL. And he's not a starting tight end in the National Football League as your one. He's just not. So that's a huge hole on the roster. It's by far the biggest hole on the team. So the fact that they got someone who could potentially have a really nice upside in the NFL, and I think it was a must. And I would have been livid on this podcast if they didn't at least do that. So at least there's hope there. He has a lot of potential. Mike's a phenomenal coach. And maybe because of the need and the lack of competition in training camp, he'll get a legitimate run there and get a lot of reps with the first team guys, and maybe he can develop into something. But I would agree. That definitely was a potential steal because he has a lot of upside. And he could be the number one option at tight end. He definitely could develop into that. This next question comes from KC Fanatic. He says, "I think we should have kept Eric Fisher. Your thoughts on him?" Also, I'm concerned with going into the season with Austin Jackson and Liam Eichenberg. Should I be concerned? I don't think the Dolphins should have kept Eric Fisher. I'm not concerned about Eichenberg as much, but I am concerned about Austin Jackson. Eichenberg at times has had good games. Like, he's actually put together good games. Austin Jackson at guard has put together good games. But I don't know. We'll see if we can consistently get the player that we thought we were getting out of USC. But I'm not really worried about it. I wouldn't worry about Eichenberg as much. This next question comes from Finn Fabric. He says, "Skaggs, the Dolphins community misses you. Time to get back on the grind. Who's your favorite pick, and who's the least favorite? We do have selected differently at 51 and 84. Well, thank you. Who is my favorite pick? Cam Smith, because he's by far the best player that we picked. And I think and especially since it's been like over a year since we've drafted someone who can actually make a difference on the field in a positive way, then yeah, Cam Smith for sure. Who would I have picked at 51? We're gonna look back on this and say how silly it was that we even considered Darnell Washington over Cam Smith. But if I'm gonna answer honestly, I would have picked the Florida guard. I would have picked Osiris, if I was the GM. But I think Cam is a better player. And who would I have picked at 84? This for sure would have picked Darnell Washington. I wouldn't have even thought about it. There's just too big of a hole at tight end. He would have been the best prospect available at that point in time. And I'm not the biggest A-Chain fan, even though he does have a ton of upside. But I would have picked Darnell Washington. This next question comes from Douglas Ward. He says, I was happy we didn't. Excuse me, let me restart. This question comes from Douglas Ward. He says, I was happy we didn't give away more future draft capital for 2024. However, Stephen Ross, the owner sucks, and we did not have a third or fourth round pick. Frustrated. What is your thoughts on a late offensive tackle we drafted? I don't really blame Stephen Ross for any of that stuff. I feel like he gets way too much hate as the owner of the team. The last 2 years, especially this offseason specifically, have been phenomenal when we compare them to other off seasons. I feel like they're definitely putting their best foot. This is the most talented roster the Dolphins have had since he's owned the team. So I'm not gonna. He's the owner of the team, and he oversaw it being assembled. Tyreek Hill, that season was special. So I don't hate on Stephen Ross as much as other people. Does it suck Brian Flores ran his mouth to the NFL? Yeah, it does suck. Why he would do that, I don't know. I love how a lot of people bring up, the stuff they did in New England was legitimate cheating. And they did it multiple times. I don't know. I'm not saying Stephen Ross is. I'm definitely not saying Stephen Ross is perfect, but I think the hate against him is a little ridiculous sometimes. And my thoughts on the tackle draft at Douglas, I don't think he's playing tackle in the NFL, and his best chance to make the team is a guard. This next question comes from Douglas. He says, did we draft the next Darren Sproles? If so, isn't that a great pick with Mostert and Wilson, who are both injury prone? He doesn't have the same open field ability Sproles did. I actually think he has better vision as a running back than Darren Sproles did, though. His vision is actually pretty special. It just sucks he's the weight and height that he is. But maybe that can improve in the NFL. And honestly, the way in the run scheme, he ran so many times in between the tackles. So maybe we can unlock a better version of what I saw of him in college in the NFL. Because, again, the way they used him in A&M was borderline ridiculous. Not borderline, it was ridiculous. I don't know why they used him like that. But I just didn't see it enough in college, and I'm like, okay, like when he does run on the edge, it's pretty, it's his cutback ability is good. There's a lot of stuff to like about him, but I don't know if he's Darren Sproles. But he can be a really, really, really nice special teamer, like a Pro Bowl special team returner for sure. He's way better than Shaquem Granite, like in terms of potential at that, and definitely better than Kenyon Drake. This next question comes from Alpha. He says, just the standard question this time, Skaggs. How do you feel we did overall in the draft? I think in terms of talent, when you compare it to Mike's first draft, it's not even comparable. They actually have two players in this draft that can really make an impact on the team and winning games this year, which I think is a big dub. Like, that's a big time W. Like, those two players, A-Chain and Cam Smith, I think for sure, without a shadow of doubt, are going to make big plays for the Dolphins this year. I think maybe A-Chain's I think some of the biggest plays will be special teams, and I think the special teams return game will be significantly better because of that draft pick. And that was one of the biggest issues with the Dolphins. The return game was actually to the point where it was hurting the team. And Cam Smith can be a really good corner in the NFL. So I liked the talent. Did I like the decision making? No, I did not like the decision making. I personally would not have made that selection, especially A-Chain. I think that was the most kind of head scratching one. It's like, oh my God, Darnell Washington fell to the third round. I feel like that was a layup. It's not something I would have done because it is such a glaring hole at that position. But maybe Mike values receiving ability at that position. And God bless Darnell Washington, but when you watch him play tight end and he has to run a route or what. It just reminds you of Marcedes Lewis, and it's like he's kind of a zero at that. I think the best thing he can do is catch a fade down the sideline or a fade in the red zone. He just doesn't offer you too much as a pass catcher, but Higgins does. He has potential to be a really good receiving tight end. So as I talk about it, I actually like the draft more than I came in to this. But, some of the decision making I wouldn't have, myself wouldn't have made. But the players, especially Cam Smith, I think in terms of talent and impact, will have much more than the last year's class was. Because last year's class was just like non-existent. So that is it, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think about the class. Off season's been great so far. I just can't wait to watch the team play. Even though I didn't agree with a lot of the decisions that were made, I do like the players. At least Cam Smith. I really liked him. And Higgins. I think those are probably my two favorite players of the draft. So that's it, guys. And I'll see you guys in the next one.